name is Councillor Hamida. I'm the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Justice, and one of my responsibilities is to chair the Croydon Congress meetings. These Croydon Congress sessions are very important. They're a biannual assembly of colleagues, leaders across all sectors in Croydon, public, private, voluntary sector, faith sector, to come together and discuss, challenging, difficult issues that the borough needs to grapple with.
I think the conference has been really positive, and I'm hoping that some of the things that we've spoken about today can be translated into how we deliver our services in Croydon. I think we've got a lot of really good strengths and assets in Croydon, and we've got a lot of community organisations that are able to work with our statutory colleagues to deliver some of the things that are going to make a difference. So it's very important that all of us come together from different walks of life and think about those people in our community who might be lonely and isolated, and think about the things that we can do together to help overcome those issues for people.
I think that the topic of social isolation is very key. It's something that people are struggling with a lot in silence. They're suffering in silence with it, and I've had experience of that myself. So I'm really glad to hear that local authorities are taking this into consideration now, because it is a main factor in things like depression and suicide rates as well.
If you are lonely and isolated, you're more likely to develop a mental health problem. And what we also know is that people with mental health problems are more likely than other people to be lonely and isolated. So the two things are very much interlinked.
It was a very positive conference. I think its primary role was to raise the profile of the issue of loneliness and social isolation, which was something that came up in the Opportunities and Fairness Commission report, that it was a major issue that we needed to tackle, because there are people all over the borough that are feeling very isolated and not very connected with their friends, their neighbours, their communities. And I think the local strategic partnership have a responsibility, and the council have a responsibility to make sure we try and address this issue for two reasons. Why? One, because it's very important to the residents of the borough, and also because ultimately, by getting people more engaged in the world and in their communities, it could lead in the future to us actually not spending as much money as we are doing now supporting people when they get into a really serious state, that we actually do that work in terms of prevention work up front and provide all the mechanisms for people to kind of get connected with people.
To see different people from different stages of life talking about their experience and how social isolation has affected them was really surprising, and the steps that are being taken to resolve this issue.
I had a very serious question to ask about the issue of combating male suicides, and I think we had some very good answers from the panel about some very practical ways of trying to work with perhaps the rather reticent older male community who may not talk about their problems, about reaching out to them. So I think it's been a very worthwhile occasion to attend.
So it's been a fantastic event today here with over 250 people in the Fairfield halls, and today's event very much came out one of the key recommendations of our Fairness Commission, that as a relatively new administration we commissioned in 2014, not I should say without some controversy, but I think that decision's been fully vindicated as we've seen the very powerful recommendations from the Fairness Commission, one of which was the challenging issue of social isolation, and we've seen this magnificent event here today dealing with a very difficult subject. But we wanted to have that research and that document to see what was actually happening out there, some of the challenges that our borough faces, along with the exciting growth of investment we're seeing. And one of the recommendations that came out the Fairness Commission was that in Croydon, like many other places, there is a huge issue with social isolation. And it's a direct result of that piece of work that we've had today's fantastic event, and I hope we'll see the powerful work, the research, the feedback and the pledges we've seen today taken forward by people in the months to come to make sure that as a town, as a borough, the council working alongside the voluntary sector and others, that we really come together to tackle this issue.
Do an event called the Parade of Nations Croydon, which brings together all nationalities in Croydon. I think this is an opportunity for me to go back to those community leaders and see how best I could inform them, and if possible train them or give them, signpost them to where help is, and I think they'll be able to communicate it to their communities in the proper way or in a much more effective way. Because sometimes we deal with language barriers, and people who are socially isolated, because of that language barrier, they tend to stay even deeper in that isolation. So we need to articulate the points through the way they would understand the message. Many a time we print things in English, but some people don't even read English. So I think that's my way forward, is to ensure that we pass this message on in different languages and in different ways, not only through the internet, but maybe through faith organization, through community organizations, then so we could reach the unreachable. In some cultures, you're not expected to be isolated, especially maybe for some of like the African cultures. They don't understand what social isolation is all about. So at times people just think, no, you just want to be what you are.
The thing that really stood out for me was the fact that it just doesn't affect elderly people, that it affects a whole range of different communities, young people, old people, people with disabilities, people with mental health issues. And I think in terms of, it requires a collective response to it. It's not just a council issue or a third sector issue. It's a real issue for the whole LSP to kind of grab and to try and tackle. One thing that we could be looking at is how we create a corporate social responsibility where we provide opportunities for our staff, many of whom live in Croydon, to actually work in a voluntary capacity actually in third sector organisations like Age UK and Mind and the organisations that featured here at the conference, to actually put their time in as part of their commitment to Croydon, to actually put their energy into trying to be part of that voluntary workforce of people to actually make those things happen. The second big thing that came out for me was around information and the fact that there's a need for some kind of brokerage mechanism whereby we have somewhere very clearly marked out exactly what the opportunities are for people to get involved and to do things, both people who may want to reach out for people to buddy up with them so they feel less isolated, but also for people who want to volunteer. And how do they, at the moment there's some big, third sector organisations, but there's a load of small grassroots organisations all across Croydon who are doing great things. How do we kind of, if you like, broker that relationship through a website or some other means at our disposal at the council to set up to kind of match those opportunities with the people who want to do stuff and the people that want to receive some support.
Social isolation can clearly affect any one of us at any time, and it cuts across all different age groups. It's clear that the council has a key role, whether it's our youth services or those working with the elderly, to make sure that people are acutely aware that that is the case and that we shouldn't make any assumptions because, as I've said, it could impact on anybody, anytime, regardless of their background. My role as the leader of the council is to ensure that we take forward today's recommendations and really do change lives out there for the better.
My pledge around loneliness and isolation will be to look at some of our services and make sure that we really are reaching out to everyone in the community. And the way that we tend to do this is by using something that we call communities of interest. And we found that if you bring people together around something that they're all interested in, then you tend to get people from all sorts of different walks of life together. So people of different ages, people from different ethnic backgrounds, people with disabilities, people without, because what's bringing them together is the fact that they're all interested in the same thing.
One of the things that struck me most about today is that social isolation can affect any one of us at any stage of our lives. The other interesting thing I think was the impact that it can have on financial services. So in terms of services the council's providing, in terms of services that our GPs are providing, there's a real financial cost to people feeling disconnected. So what can we do collectively as a community to make people feel more connected and to include more of us? As Vice Chair of the Opportunity and Fairness Commission, and now in the Cabinet portfolio that holds responsibility for the implementation of the report, I'm really clear that I really want to take that report and make sure that all those themes, including social isolation, keep on the forefront of the agenda so that we can make sure that they have the commitment, the political commitment, the executive commitment across the borough to really put them into practice and make them real.
One of the things that I'll definitely take away is integrating younger people with elder people, because one of the points that I made was that the modern day grandmothers, about 30 to 45. So I think it's really important to integrate younger people, teenagers and the youth, with much elderly people in their 80s and 90s, because they have wisdom that they can give to us, but we can also bring that youth back to them through music and arts and just loving on them.
From my point of view, the contribution that the Opportunity and Fairness Commission report has made is really important. I was privileged to be the Vice Chair of that commission. It was set up by the Council last year to try and identify the key issues around equality and identify how we can tackle those. We identified 6 broad themes that we thought were relevant to that topic about tackling equality more effectively, and one of them was social isolation. I was quite struck it wasn't one of those issues that I was very familiar with. Some of my other colleagues that come from a health background and a voluntary sector background were really clear that that needed to be a priority, and our consensus was that there just didn't seem to be enough visible leadership in the place of Croydon about this issue. So I'm really encouraged to see that the next Croydon Congress meeting after the publication of the Opportunity and Fairness Commission report was on social isolation and loneliness.
I think from the Campaign to End Loneliness perspective, what we'd really like to see coming out of this are some real commitment to driving this issue forward. We campaign for those who are over 65, but I think what's really clear here today is there's a real appetite to do something across the generations and across the community, and I think that's really promising.